Okay, now we are going to study reading comprehension. Let's listen to the audio.
Mr. Jones's shop sold food. Mr. Jones and a young man worked there. The young man's name was George. A man came into the shop on Monday. He was a funny man. Mr. Jones was in the office. It was behind the shop. The funny man looked at George and said, "I want a small table, please." George said, "We don't sell tables in this shop. We sell food." The man smiled and answered, "A small, brown table." He took a picture out of his bag and showed it to George. It was a picture of a small, brown table. George put his mouth near the man's ear and said, "We do not have tables in this shop. Food, not tables." The man smiled and answered, "That's good. Thank you." Then he sat down on a chair and waited. George was not happy. He went into the office and spoke to Mr. Jones. Then he and Mr. Jones came out again. Mr. Jones was angry. He looked at the man and said, "What do you want?" The man smiled and answered, "I want a loaf of brown bread, please." "Haven't you got any bread in your shop?" Mr. Jones said, "Yes, we have." He looked at George, and then he went and got a loaf of brown bread from a big box and gave it to the man.
Okay, now that is the story about Mr. Jones and George and a customer. Yeah, yeah, customer. A customer is a man. Yeah. Now try to answer this exercise. Now let me listen to the exercise.
Exercise 1. Look at these questions. Find the right answers.
Cari
Then write
jawaban
the
yang benar.
questions and the answers. 1. Did Mr. Jones work in George's shop? A. No, he didn't. B. Yes, he did. 2. Who worked in Mr. Jones's shop? A. A funny man did. B. George did. 3. Did the shop sell tables, or food? A. It sold food. B. It sold tables. 4. Did the funny man ask George for some food? A. No, he didn't. B. Yes, he did. 5. Did the funny man ask George for a table? A. No, he didn't. B. Yes, he did. 6. Did George show him a table? A. No, he didn't. B. Yes, he did. 7. Whose office did George go into then? A. Mr. Jones's. B. The funny man's. 8. Did Mr. Jones speak to the funny man? A. No, he didn't. B. Yes, he did. 9. Was Mr. Jones happy, or angry? A. He was angry. B. He was happy. 10. Did the funny man ask Mr. Jones for a table, or some food? A. A table. B. Some food.
Okay, that is the exercise 1. Now we go to the exercise 2. Write this story. Choose the right words each time. Let's listen.
Exercise 2. Write this story. Choose the right words each time. Mr. Jones sold food tables and chairs in his shop. His shop was behind in front of his office. A funny young man worked in the shop too. The funny man came into the shop on Monday. He asked Mr. Jones for a chair table. Then he showed George a picture of a table. George did not sold the funny man a small, brown table. The funny man smiled, was not happy. He sat down and waited, was angry. Then George the funny man brought Mr. Jones out of the office shop. Mr. Jones smiled, was not happy. The funny man asked him for a loaf of brown bread, small, brown table, and Mr. Jones gave him a big box it to him.
Now we go to exercise 3. Look at these pictures. Put a, an, or some in the empty places. Now listen to the audio.
Exercise 3. Use a and when we can count a thing, and some when we cannot. Use an only when the next word begins with a, e, I, a, or u, or an h which is not pronounced, e.g. an hour. 5. Look at these pictures. Put a, an, or some, in the empty places. 1. George is eating meal. He is putting food in his mouth with fork. 2. Now George is putting butter on his bread with knife. 3. This is loaf of bread. There is cheese near it. 4. This is egg. It is in water. 5. This is glass. There is milk in it. Tea in this cup. 6. There is tea in this cup. There is spoon in it. 7. This is cup 2. There is coffee in it. 8. This is picture of table. Gladys